Well, I've been on the board about a year now, although I've been involved with Cascale for many years with my previous employer, and then a number of our target team members are on various Cascale working groups. So my board experience is relatively new, but my Cascale experience is tenured. One of the things I've realized throughout my career is that there's just no way a brand acting on its own can create a lot of impactful change. And we really need to be working in collaboration with multi-stakeholders. What I'm very excited about at Cascale is the breadth of experience across the brand retailer side, the manufacturer side, and the affiliate side. So you really have a very broad multi-stakeholder initiative that's working on practical approaches to change our industry, and that really personally excites me. Early on in my career, I worked for the International Labor Organization, and prior to working full-time for the International Labor Organization, I worked for the U.S. Council for International Business that represents U.S. companies in international organizations, including at the International Organization of Employers that represents the employers group at the ILO. And so in the very forming years of my career, I learned a lot about social dialogue and conventions and ratification of conventions, and really the process of building up to those agreements. I sat in hours and hours and hours of tripartite discussion and was really just captivated by the complexity of it, but also the power of divergent groups coming together for a common purpose. And I really believe in that amount of dialogue, social dialogue, and the power of multi-stakeholders working together. So that's been a common theme throughout my career. I've also been involved in other multi-stakeholder initiatives in the apparel industry specifically. For example, the Fair Labor Association, I was on the board and very involved with the FLA for years. And I sit on a couple of other multi-stakeholder boards as well. And really, this is just the belief in the efficacy and power of groups that might on the surface have different opinions, but are ultimately trying to do the same thing, coming together and trying to create change. It's really interesting. You know, I've been in this line of work for over 25 years, and there were times in my career journey that I felt that this function was being treated as a nice to have a little bit. You know, we have to have this sustainability function or this labor practices function or whatever you want to call it, but it felt a little bit on the outside of core business. And that has really changed in the last, I would say, particularly the last 5 to 7 years, where companies, manufacturers, affiliates, civil society, consumers all realize the centrality of sustainability. And so for me, one of the real sharp points for that right now is the climate crisis. And the fact that so many, individuals that may not think about sustainability in their everyday lives are seeing the impact on non-sustainable choice. And so that's a real hot area. Okay, no pun intended. But that's a real concern for all of us in the sustainability world. But also for me, equally important is this marrying of climate and social justice. We know that the most impacted by climate change are already the most vulnerable. And so in this instance, we're looking at, hundreds and thousands of workers across the globe that are working in conditions that are dangerous to them from a health perspective because of global warming. And these are things that we have to grapple through together to address. And that's one of the reasons I really love the work of Cascale is the work isn't siloed. We are trying to think through these issues holistically. Target, similar to other brands that belong to Cascale, has a dedicated team that focuses on responsible sourcing and sustainability. And we work from issues of basic compliance. We call that our standards of vendor engagement. We work on taking collective audits that we've agreed on that are shared by other brands, remediating where we find issues. Our real goal is not to, remove factories from the supply chain, but really to see their performance elevated. So the teams that I have the honor to lead across the globe are working alongside factory management on those aspirational goals, but also on the remediation of compliance to ensure that the factories are meeting the standards. And then, we're involved as well in a number of multi-stakeholder initiatives to move beyond basic compliance in areas of worker well-being, climate change, conversion to renewable energy, the setting of science-based targets, et cetera. And I'm involved personally at the board, but my team is equally involved in many of the working groups of Cascale and within other organizations that are like-minded and trying to also create change in our industry. One of the great things about Cascale is the many opportunities that a member has to be involved, from the annual meeting to the manufacturing forums that are held around the world to various working groups that one can opt into. And that's where we see really the development of the tools that Cascale uses, because Cascale isn't just an aspirational platform, it's also working across its multi-stakeholders to implement tools to actually measure progress. And here I'm talking about things that we've adopted broadly. For example, the factory environmental module, FEM 4.0 is rolling out. But there's a number of other tools as well that Cascale has that really helps us to quantify the impact in our factories. And our teams are working alongside of other brands and the affiliates and manufacturers to develop those tools, and then to drive their adoption throughout the supply chain. And that, I think, is hard work. It's not something that's done quickly, but it's the really important work that we need to collectively do. I think there are times it's hard to be optimistic when we see the world changing around us, and we question whether we're doing enough. And we talked about tools, and while I believe in tools, our whole reason for being can't just be to develop tools. We've got to create impact, especially now. And I guess despite the challenges, one reason that I remain optimistic is that there's more focus on these issues now, not just from a group of sustainability practitioners, but across the business. And we can have these discussions deeply inside the business about choices that we need to make. I'm excited when I run into, which I do regularly, I hear from students that are, interested in environmental sciences, wanting to go into sustainability. When I was their age, that conversation was very rare. And now there's just such a hunger and appetite for this. So I have a lot of confidence in the next generation. And that keeps me optimistic that we will find ways to address the challenges we're in. But at the same time, I would say this is hard work, and you have to be committed to this for the long run. There's no quick and easy fix, obviously. I've received so much advice and probably given way too much advice at this point. But the one advice that really resonates for me right now, particularly as we're in a world that seems to be more and more divisive, and the stakes seem very high, is just to continue to be curious. And when we're in a multi-stakeholder initiative, I think that's a really great adage to live by, because it's easy to go into a discussion about these topics and think about what my interests as a company are, or my interest as part of a brand or retailer group. I think the challenge here is to remain curious about, for example, what challenges my manufacturing partners are having, and what they see as their vision. And I think, replacing judgment and confidence with curiosity is really a great opening stance to be able to contribute effectively to a multi-stakeholder conversation. I would say creating sustainable impact. It's easy to do something once. It's easy to do a pilot here and there. And we often see groups spring up that do some wonderful pilots that can create small pockets of change. But we're looking for scalable solutions across a very broad supply chain. And I think Cascale is best positioned to identify those solutions and to canvas action and propel action across the industry. And so that's what I'm thinking about when I think about the future of Cascale. As is with almost anything in life, you get out of it what you put into it. And one of the things I've noticed while being at the board is there are a few very active manufacturers, there are a few very active brands and retailers, and there are a few very active affiliates. And then there's a long tail of members that are not so active. And I guess my message, if those any of you are listening to this that are in those buckets, would be to take a step towards more engagement and activity. And that could look a lot of different ways. It doesn't mean joining every committee, coming to every meeting, but if you can add a little bit more of your personal time and vision and energy, we really need that as a multi-stakeholder initiative. We don't want to be a club of a few. We want to be a coalition of many.